Hello, lovies. This is Christina with Karma's Eye Psychic LLC, Universal Spirit Podcast. We are almost at the end of this series as we draw closer and closer to the end of April. This subject that we'll be talking about this week will be about the word love. What the word love means in the spiritual community, the different meanings of it, the different vibrations of it, and basically the different meanings of it in general and how it applies to our spirit, our spiritual life, our spiritual culture, what we mean about it romantically, what we mean about it, for ourselves, just basically, the definition of love, like what is love? Like I know everyone just thought of that Night at the Roxbury song, what is love? I literally thought about it when I began writing the podcast. I thought it was hilarious because it is one of the things that we still cannot define. We still are searching. We still are trying to figure out, what love is, what makes us love. How do we choose? Does it choose us? And where does it come from? Where is it going? How it started basically, and how we define, our ancestors, spirit guides, the earth and nature all around us, the universe, people we love around us, lessons we've learned. Love really is such a universal, very technically undefined thing. It is all different to all people, in all ways possible. So if we start with the definition of love, this would be a general definition of where you could find in the dictionary, just love being an intense feeling of deep affection or a great interest or pleasure in something, feeling deep affection for something, someone, and something that you like or enjoy very much. It's on a deeper level than just liking it. You love it. You can't live without it. It is something now that is become a part of you and attached to you. It then becomes almost like a living thing inside of you. For most people to believe that love itself is in fact a spiritual entity, just like a spirit or a person. For those of you who've heard, Jesus is love and God is love and nature is love and there's universal love, that this force of life that causes such positivity sometimes doesn't necessarily manifest itself in positive ways. We've heard of tough love, right, which indicates the ends justify the means. I did the terrible thing to save this person from X, Y, and Z, or save myself from this and that, or whatever, manifesting itself in a little bit more intense, not so comfortable ways. Just understanding that the reasoning for the actions would be love of self, love of others, love of a pet, or love of life, or love of people, or whichever. We could break it down to the most, the most popular idea of love, if we get that one out of the way first, would be romantic love. Right? Because that's something that we're always searching for, romantic love, to be with a partner or partners, or just an external way of receiving love. How this would translate in a lot of, spiritual communities would be that it would be more defined as a spell, or if not, a long-term infatuation, which would then imply that the feeling itself of love romantically does in fact have a bit of an expiration date. Now, I know that sounds very negative, but in the spiritual community where we believe things are infinite, the idea of romantic love and how it has in fact been very impacted by, our society as it has changed between, pleasure and, hunting and, roles changing, gender roles being different, and a lot of issues with financial things and how our particular country in America things are going. Love seems to be something that is basically like having a gallon of milk for 14 days, so to speak. And it does sound very, negative. But anyway, that's kind of how the spiritual community is kind of like what we really need, right? Would be self-love, which is considered to be infinite. Self-love being tied to the universe, being tied to the reference of universal love. Universal love meaning you can experience love from everything and everywhere. Every situation you've ever been in, being safe from something, having a lesser blow of a bad situation, having, miracles appear into your life, and living, having another day in your life, being universal love, coming from everything around you, understanding and experiencing and really having a lot of gratitude. There's the friendship love that we are all familiar with, just people that we are connected to, people that we would consider to be these twin flames, soulmates, blood brothers, blood sisters, spiritual bonds that with people that we cannot seem to sever. More so on a positive level, right? It just be more like, oh, that's my brother in Christ. That's my brother in spirit. That's my brother, in the universe. We are connected somehow. We are universally connected. There's also the, self-love. Now, the reason why self-love has become more and more popular is because of the fall of romantic love. So you would consider that to be a positive, right? To dismantle the fantasies and unrealistic goals and basically the lies of romantic love, this manufactured construct, as it unravels and dismantles, it is unveiling this thing called self-love, which is something we are supposed to establish before we get into really any type of love relationship, any type of friendship, or any type of, even universal love. People will link universal love to self-love. It is, I would agree with that. But I do believe it's an entity, in itself as well. I feel as though self-love is like the root of everything. Just accepting oneself, the way you look, the way you talk, your place in life, understanding you are not defined by things such as your race and class and, family or whichever thing that you might find negative, that self-love will basically trump all that. Self-love is basically the invincible, card that you can play against anything that could ever try to put you down. Right? So self-love is basically like step one, in this world, which I find is really amazing because it's literally, most of the time people find self-love last after they have friendship love and, platonic and romantic, and all this other, experiences. The spiritual community, and most spiritual practices, especially a lot of, Black magic, white magic, Norse pagan, and Celtic religions, even a lot of Sumerian, is that self-love is the main driver, or self-love is supposed to be the main driver. It's as if you don't love self, what exactly are you doing? Where are your motives coming from? Being motivated by other people's, desires while leaving yourself out of the equation. Right? You're trying to achieve a goal that really has nothing to do with you, nothing you really love. You would say you love that person enough to pursue something that you don't really care about, leaving self-love out of it, ultimately it failing because self-love is the major part of the equation, right? Self-love, taking care of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual body, making sure that you do what's best for you, stay in safe spaces, stay around very positive people, and try to bring yourself into as many positive situations as possible. Just to give a glimpse of self-love, we will one day have a podcast just on self-love. It is the most interesting love of all, and let's just face it, guys, Whitney Houston was right. The greatest love of all is loving yourself. It really is. Once you do it, everything really just falls into place after that. It's really the best type of love you could ever experience. Moving into unconditional love. This one is great because this one is so like there's so many variables how it's defined. Self-love, unconditional love being, like I will stick with you no matter what. People wonder if it's even a choice. Is unconditional love a choice? Is it that we just decide that I'm only going to unconditionally love my children? I'm going to unconditionally love my mom and dad, and family and friends. Is it a choice, or is it just something that, you just go along with, that the love itself being its separate entity, being its own physical, metaphysical force, driving you, to continue to support people that might always be failing, support people that might not always be great to you, and constantly supporting, situations that might not quite be serving you, but you might not be directly in, the impact of anything negative. For example, supporting, a friend that has a terrible drug addiction. It's kind of like, I have unconditional love for this friend. I will support them no matter what. Even when you have mentally have had it, because it does drain you mentally and emotionally, that you will then continue to seek out that friend to see if that friend needs help. That idea of unconditional love has been defined by how the universe loves us, how we have made mistakes intentionally and unintentionally, and yet we are still allowed to live another day to then fix those mistakes, whether or not the universe could be done with us, right? That we continue to grow and try, and that the universe always smiles upon us at least trying, but it's that unconditional love that basically, adds I would say just credit into our karma account, so to speak, right? We have just, set so many standards for unconditional love as well. It's just kind of like, that's only for kids, or it's only for your spouse, or it's only for your family. When the truth is, when I was speaking about twin flames, unconditional love really is for anyone. It's like your heart will choose who you want to love. Do you choose mentally? Not necessarily. There are people who are in love with other people romantically because they, their heart has chosen that. And that's in my twin flame podcast. Moving forward, that the spiritual community and how we see these ideas, not speaking for everyone, but I'm speaking for those who do, in fact, think like I do, that when it comes to unconditional love, it's something that we should be expressing even to our enemies, not to be in the presence of our enemies constantly, but to understand forgiveness, to unconditionally love everyone as a being, as a learning being, that at some point they will learn just as well as we have, and vice versa. We are still making mistakes for them to love and put up and tolerate us. That it can be a fact, like I said, it's a give and take of our credit on our karma account. We are all learning. We would assume that people who are consciously making negative decisions, that they would then, be reincarnated to another round of this place, and us spiritual, people who are, in our community, we try to get to the highest level of consciousness so we do not have to repeat another go round. There are some spiritual people in the community who are very excited about repeating another cycle to learn more lessons, coming from a place of love. When doing magic and witchcraft and black magic and white magic and spells and incantations and rituals, the word love comes from a very deep place. When we say things like, I'm doing the intention of this ritual is coming from a place of love. When I am saying these words, it's coming from a place of love. And when we say that, it really is kind of like it's coming from either unconditional love, universal love, where we are gathering consciousness. It could even be romantic love. It's like, I love this person and we're doing a cleansing, or we're doing a binding, just as an example. Coming from a place of love also refers to if you are a very well marinated practitioner. It comes from a place of very deep self-love, regardless of what the ritual may be. It could be love work, court work, whichever, even for court rituals. They say this is coming from a place of love. I need this situation to be resolved. I know it's negative for me. It's negative for the other parties involved and for, the community at large. That saying it's coming from a place of love is basically coming from a place of showing everyone fairness, showing everyone kindness, showing everyone space, forgiveness, and etc. Coming from that place where love is the number one reason. And I would definitely suggest that any type of spell work, witchcraft, or ritual work would in fact come from a place of love. Now, could you imagine revenge spells coming from a place of love? Yes, it can. Even though revenge is packed full of hate, the need to avenge someone that you love really is the reason. Just a little hint as to why those spells might not work, because some people don't use the word love coming from a place of love, but you are trying to avenge someone that you love. It could be a child, it could be a friend, it could be yourself. You can say, universe, I need this karma, to happen. I love myself to understand that this person should not be going out to do this to me again. Like a way of protecting yourself, or a way of protecting your child, or a way of protecting your mom or your dad or whoever. Okay? So, that is something that you probably didn't know. But yes, when you're doing spell work, always come from a place of love. That's another reason why I love those things don't work. When setting intentions as well in the spiritual community, like I said before, coming from a place of love, it could be for anything. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be for ritual reasons. It just could be for, spreading peace, just wanting to have a harmonious, experience, or environment. It's coming from a place of love. It's kind of like, I might not agree with people in my environment, but out of a place of love, we have to find a way to get along somehow, bring differences together where it is no longer hostile, because it's healthier for me and them, and you, to get, the universe and, everything involved, to set this intention. Then it's kind of like, love being a separate entity, moving itself, moving you, using us as vessels to then manifest that into reality, right? Love being the most powerful force in the universe, they say, right? Which is a common thing to believe. I believe it is. I don't know if it's the most powerful. I feel it's just as equal as hate and all negativity. I'm very black and white about that. That it will manifest and use us as a vessel to then manifest kindness, love, and then not everyone will follow suit. However, the intention will be extremely powerful, almost contagious, right? To this point, like, well, she's experiencing love, I'm experiencing hate. My hate can't seem to penetrate that wall, so I will either just stop my negative behavior, stop being in their space, and then the manifestation of that would have been, successful. I'm trying to gather my thoughts again. What else? I mean, if there's any other type that I have not touched on, definitely leave a comment. Always comment on these. But why would I bring this up now? Because in the spiritual community, love is just defined differently. We don't believe that love has an expiration. We do know that love is ever evolving, that you can be smiling at someone one minute, say you love them, and really be furious at them years later and still love them. That the love itself is not, what society defines it. It is a living thing. Just like when people say God is love, Jesus is love, that your ancestors are love, your spirit guides are love, yourself is love, the life inside of you is love. It is a spirit that is ever moving, is ever evolving, doesn't quite leave you. You could start off loving a person one way and then end up loving them a different way. A lot of this happens when marriages fall apart. You love them romantically at first, and then it's kind of like you guys have like friendship love, as best you can anyway. The love for each other doesn't seem to die. Like, let's just be honest. Even people who hate each other after divorce, you still have a little smidgen of love that's still alive there. Okay? whether it is, repressed by disappointment and sadness and betrayal and all that jazz, the love itself cannot technically die. Comment if you disagree. Definitely comment if you disagree. Even the love between siblings, even if things go wrong between siblings throughout their life, the love doesn't technically die. You always want to check up on the person, want to know what's going on. The love, even if you have a thought, if you don't ever put it into physical action, the thought is just of the love itself, the entity just giving you a signal that it is still in fact alive in you. That we are all blessed and we are all, having the opportunity to experience love in one way or another before we leave our lives. It could be the love of a caregiver when our parents were not available. It could be the love of a teacher. It could be the love of anyone. And it could be just a simple little spark of love within ourselves that drive us to do better one random day, or maybe we become, very dedicated and determined to love ourselves. That love in this spiritual community, really is just something that we can't really catch. We can't really technically chase. It's like it's here. It's all over the place. It really is something that lives within us, lives around us, and is always seeking us, or it's always, alive and available. So having those realistic expectations as to what love is something that is very well rooted in the spiritual community. Okay, because the expectation that it would be romantic, the expectation that, we would allow society to put rules, on what it should be, is not something that we accept. We understand that love can even disappoint us, and it then becomes that we end up disappointing ourselves by putting unrealistic expectations on a construct, on a flawed construct, that your romantic partner should act a certain way, or your mom should act a certain way, or, because people are related to you, they should act a certain way. Okay, so the spiritual community is just like we are all controlled by forces, just at different times, and we are growing and learning, and we are absolutely positively not perfect, and we can't expect the flow of love to be as such as well. So comment what you think. Comment if you got anything from this, if you felt as though this was relevant of a episode. I'd always want you to comment and have those conversations with me. I will be bringing on a special guest soon to speak about, higher consciousness. We are getting higher and higher in our consciousness throughout this podcast. That is the whole goal of this. We start at the bottom. Now we're moving forward, moving up. Basically, we're moving like all the way up the chakras, right? For those of you who are familiar with chakras, because next week we will be speaking about all 7 chakras and what they mean, how they were defined, how they were, discovered and all that. But to conclude this episode, speaking on love, that the spiritual community is really, founded, or, has the foundation of being that the universal love, self-love, love being a entity, being something that is for our highest good at all times, no matter what situation love is in. Like I said, for those doing spell work, and just prayer, forgiveness, and just, really opposing forces, that love, is to be said to be the most powerful force. Like I said, I still feel though it's as equal to negativity, because those two things are a choice, and love is a choice. So in the spiritual community, we are writing our destinies every day. We choose love every day, then we are destined to have a life full of it. So once again, this is Christina from Karma's Eye Psychic LLC here on Universal Spirit Podcast. I hope you guys have a great night. I hope you guys enjoyed listening, and I love speaking with you. All right, see you next week.